Welcome to our latest explainer. I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine a cinematic, glowing 14th century illuminated manuscript opening up right in front of you. The rich red and gold inks just magically flow across the heavy parchment to form the silhouette of our subject today. We're stepping into the 14th century, Chaucer's age. Now, this wasn't just a world of romantic knights and towering castles, not at all. It was a violent, intensely transformative era that literally cracked the foundation of the medieval world and ultimately birthed the English Renaissance.
Which brings us to a massive paradox, and really the core question of this entire explainer. How exactly did an era defined by unimaginable devastation, we're talking plague, war, and mass rebellion, manage to give birth to such an incredible flourishing of literary art? Well, as we'll see, extreme pressure either crushes a society entirely or it forces it to evolve. In England's case, this immense societal trauma created the perfect canvas for a brand new type of art.
Module 1. The Chaotic 14th Century.
To understand the literature, you really have to understand the sheer chaos of the times. Imagine the era splitting into these dynamic, shifting panels of history. First, you've got the Hundred Years' War kicking off in 1337. This brought immense financial strain and actually sparked a fierce new wave of English nationalism. Just 10 years later, the shadow of the Grim Reaper falls over Europe, the Black Death. And the socio-economic fallout of that plague, it eventually boils over into the mass peasants' revolt of 1381, proving once and for all that the lower classes were a massive political force.
The sheer scale of this demographic shift is honestly staggering. The Black Death wiped out roughly half of England's population. Half! It's an unfathomable tragedy, but it inadvertently rewired their entire economy. Because so many laborers died, there was suddenly this severe labor shortage. To put that into perspective, for the very first time in the Middle Ages, the surviving peasantry actually had the leverage to demand better wages and living conditions. The rigid feudal system was basically collapsing in real time.
But while the feudal system was fracturing, the Roman Catholic Church remained this towering, dominant force. In the 14th century, the Church wielded extreme wealth and political power, often completely overshadowing the monarchy itself. They collected mandatory taxes, known as tithes, and generated incredible revenue by selling indulgences, which were essentially paid pardons for your sins. But, all this immense wealth drew heavy criticism. The Church began facing serious challenges from reformers like Oxford professor John Wycliffe and his Lollard movement, who started loudly questioning this systemic corruption.
Module 2. Emergence of English Literature.
So out of all this chaos, English literature suddenly finds its voice. But the writers of the day were taking very different paths. You have heavyweights like William Langland writing Piers Plowman, which was a serious moral critique of society. Then you have John Gower writing conservative, moralistic tales spanning 3 entirely different languages. But then there's Geoffrey Chaucer. He takes a completely different radical path with the Canterbury Tales, blending diverse European styles with this incredibly sharp, biting humor.
The real game changer here is Chaucer's bold choice of language. Back then, the court spoke French, the church used Latin, and English? Well, English was just viewed as the rough, uneducated dialect of the commoner. But Chaucer boldly chose to write in Middle English anyway. By doing that, he single-handedly elevated the everyday language of the streets into true, high literary art. And that revolutionary move is exactly why he's remembered today as the father of English literature.
Module 3. Enter the Tabard M.
To pull off his ambitious vision, Chaucer used a brilliant literary device called a frame narrative. Simply put, it's a story within a story. It acts as the overarching plot that organically connects a widely diverse cast of characters, their individual tales, and their completely different social classes. It's like a giant puzzle. It's the glue holding the entire epic together.
The setup is just brilliant. The poem opens in April, and a group of 29 vastly different pilgrims happen to cross paths at the warm, bustling Tabard Inn in Southwark, just outside London. They're all preparing to travel together on a religious pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury. Imagine this chaotic, noisy tavern scene at night, with laughing and drinking, where an absolute cross-section of 14th century society is suddenly forced under one roof.
To pass the time on the long, dusty ride, the jovial tavern host Harry Bailey proposes a game. The rules are simple. The pilgrims will travel together to Canterbury. Every person has to tell 2 stories on the way there and 2 more on the way back. Harry Bailey himself serves as the judge, and whoever tells the best tale wins a free supper back at the Tabard Inn. This one simple storytelling contest is the narrative engine driving the entire masterpiece.
Module 4. Subverting the 3 Estates.
Chaucer uses this road trip to pull off an estate satire. Now, an estate satire is a genre that represents the traditional social classes or estates of society, but it specifically satirizes and exaggerates their flaws to expose human hypocrisy. It was a way for an author to playfully yet sharply critique the social norms of their day. For centuries, the medieval world was strictly divided into three distinct pillars. You had those who pray, the clergy, those who fight, the nobility, and those who work, the peasantry. But remember all that chaos we talked about earlier? That chaos created massive cracks in these ancient pillars. Take a look at that fourth group, the disruptors. Because of the massive economic shifts following the plague, a rising middle class of merchants, guildsmen, and physicians was emerging. They were gaining wealth and influence, but they totally broke the old rules. They didn't fit neatly into pray, fight, or work. Chaucer brilliantly takes these new, upwardly mobile characters and places them right alongside the traditional estates, showing us how the old medieval social order was being actively subverted right before their eyes. It's like a new, modern brick suddenly pushing up through the old medieval floorboards.
Module 5. Pilgrims. Good, bad, complex.
Chaucer's narrator essentially plays dumb, which perfectly lets the pilgrims expose themselves as we cycle through them, almost like we're flipping through medieval tarot cards. First, we get the good, the idealized characters. Take the noble knight, for example. He represents the very highest ideals of the fading chivalric code. Bound to duty, honor, and truth, he genuinely lives up to the strict moral codes of his time.
But then, oh boy, we get the bad. The deeply flawed, deceitful figures who represent systemic corruption. The pardoner is probably the most famous example here. He's a slimy hypocrite who blatantly exploits the faith of the poor by selling them fake holy relics, literally passing off pig bones as saints' relics, just to line his own pockets. Chaucer neutrally presents his grotesque greed, letting the guy's own pride in his con jobs completely condemn him. And finally, we get the complex characters, the ones who defy easy categorization and feel shockingly modern. The wife of Bath is a complete masterclass in this. Outspoken, much married, and wearing bold, red cloth with a gap-toothed smile, she fiercely advocates for women having sovereignty over their own lives. She isn't just some flat stereotype, she's an incredibly deep, multifaceted psychological portrait of a woman navigating a deeply patriarchal world.
Decades later, the famous English poet John Dryden looked back at the incredible diversity of Chaucer's cast and summarized it flawlessly. He said, "Here is God's plenty." And that really hits the nail on the head. It captures just how expansive, recognizable, and deeply human Chaucer's array of characters was. From the highest, most idealized nobles to the absolute lowest scoundrels, the entire spectrum of humanity is riding on that dirt road to Canterbury.
Module 6. Chaucer's lasting literary legacy.
Chaucer did so much more than just write an entertaining poem. By combining sharp humor, deep irony, and unprecedented social observation, he actively documented the slow, often painful transition of a society moving into the early modern period. As the ink dries on his pages, his work transcends being just a story. It remains an essential, living, historical archive of human nature itself.
Which brings us to a final thought to chew on. The Canterbury Tales holds up a mirror to the pride, the greed, the virtue, and the comedy of the human experience. So, considering Chaucer's timeless mirror, how much of this chaotic 14th century world, with its shifting social classes, its institutional corruption, and its completely diverse voices, still reflects us today? Has human nature really changed at all since the Middle Ages? I'll leave you to ponder that one. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.